Hey everyone, Dodge Viper owner's experience. What is it like to own a Dodge Viper? I've had quite a few people ask me this, and I tell them this car is an absolute blast to own. Let's start off with the performance. 450 horsepower on paper. There's been enough third-party dyno testing to prove that most of them are over 500 for second generation. The torque is what really makes this car crazy. Most people dismiss this car, oh, it's only 450 horsepower, and nowadays Mustang GTs are almost making that amount of horsepower, but the torque is what really makes this car different. You will never forget the torque in this car when you drive it. There is just torque everywhere. The car is instantly responsive, especially for a car that doesn't have forced induction like so many high horsepower cars have now. You will never forget, if you ever have the opportunity to drive a Viper, which I highly recommend, go out, rent one. They're not that expensive to rent as far as exotic cars go. The first time you nail the gas in this car, first off, make sure you're under your safe conditions when you do it, but you will never, ever forget what it feels like to match the gas in a car like this. The response is just unbelievable. Transmission, the gearing is super tall, so the engine takes quite a while to get through each gear. It's a very slow revving engine. 6 gear is totally useless, but because there's so much torque available all the time in this car, even if you have the car in 6 gear, you're kind of cruising, if you just roll on the throttle, it picks up pretty good considering you're basically lugging it if you're under 55 miles an hour or so. The steering is very precise in this car. There's a tiny bit of slop in the steering, just a tiny bit. I'm guessing that's probably because you have rubber bushings in the steering. If you had a race car with it had all aluminum or polyurethane in place of, it would be a little bit more precise, but it would make the ride a little bit more harsh. But overall, the steering is very precise. There's almost zero slop in it, which is perfect for a street car. This is an ACR, so the suspension's a little bit stiff for street use. This is a dynamic suspension ACR, so the rear is a little bit bouncy and a little bit stiffer than it really should have been. But overall, it's very compliant. You can really throw this car into corners, and it really responds well. It doesn't handle... It does have a bad reputation for handling just because it's American, but that's really not true. It handles very well overall. And of course, having big tires on it too, the car does make a ton of grip, whether it's in a straight line, which you can't easily spin the tires in this car, but throwing this thing into a corner, it does respond very well. So as far as the wow factor of this car, pretty much everybody that knows anything about cars knows what this thing is. So the wow factor is usually pretty high. Most people will stop you like at a gas station, or if you stop somewhere and ask you about the car, just because there's really not a lot of these things running around. They only made about 1,000 of them, give or take, every year. So the production numbers are really pretty low. You go to most car shows, you'll maybe see one, especially compared to some other high production cars like Corvette. You see a million of those things, but these things, you don't really see a lot of them just driving around, so that makes the experience of owning it really unique. Most people have never seen one in person. They've only seen one maybe driving by, but they've never seen one up close. So I mean, I love answering the questions for people, letting them see the car, because I know what it's like to be on the other side looking in and not be able to have a car like this. And I always try to just remember that and oblige people and just let them look. I'll show them whatever they want to see. I'll let them, you know, if they're respectful, I'll let them sit in it. So, but, you know, the car is just, it's a blast to own, and you will never forget if you have the opportunity to drive this. Like I said, go rent one. They're not expensive to rent, especially compared to a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. Most exotic places will rent the newer versions of these things. They usually don't have these older ones left anymore. But the car is a blast to drive. It's easy to maintain. It's easy to work on. I said this in my other videos, but I would highly recommend you go out and get one of these. If you want something, not a daily driver, I would not recommend this car as a daily driver, but if you want something as a nice Sunday car, something unique, you want to spend, say, you know, in the $40,000 range, what you would spend on a new Mustang or a new Camaro or a new Challenger, but you want something different, something that everybody doesn't have. This is a great option. A lot of people dismiss this car, oh, it's too ridiculous looking, the gas mileage sucks. Who cares? If you want something that you're not going to drive a lot, get something unique, get something everybody else doesn't have. Yes, the gas mileage is atrocious. I think I get like 13 in this car if I drive around with a light foot. But, I mean, who cares? You're buying a Dodge Viper. Do you really care about the gas mileage? But definitely check these things out. it's an amazing car to own. I don't think you'll ever regret owning a car like this. I mean, you know what you're getting into. It's only got 2 seats. The trunk's actually pretty big on this car. You can get quite a bit of stuff in this car if you really want to. But I mean, you know you're getting a car with very low practicality and very high performance, and you'll definitely like this car. The first time you climb into this car, you'll never forget it. You have to basically climb down to get into this car. Like a lot of cars you kind of just get into. Well, this thing you have to sort of brace yourself to get down into it because it sits so low to the ground. But let me give you a little hearing of this thing. That's what this car is all about. It's about performance. You don't care about comfort so much. You don't care about practicality, but that's what this car is designed for. Having a good time, taking it on back roads. You know, if you want to race it, you can race it. It's a great, fun car that I love this car. You know, this is the car I always wanted, and it was the first real performance car I bought as sort of my specialty car. But the interior, it's pretty bare. There's really not a lot going on in here. Obviously, as any car ages, it's gonna fall out of the practical standpoint. It's not gonna have all the modern amenities that a newer car has. It doesn't have Bluetooth or any of that crap. But when you drive a car like this, do you really care? Are you really worried about talking on your phone? You should be worried about this. Who cares about that other stuff? Go out and enjoy yourself. It's simple layout. It's easy to read. There's not a ton going on in here. The seats are pretty comfortable. The newer generation seats are a little bit nicer, but overall these are pretty comfortable. The leather's pretty soft, and it's very unique in here. The steering wheel is very small. You have that kind of cockpit feel because the transmission tunnel sits so high. So you definitely feel like you're in something like nothing else, and that's really true. I think these cars have aged pretty well. When you consider that this design was from the late 80s, I mean, that's pretty unbelievable, considering when you look at most late 80s Ferraris and Corvettes and everything else, they didn't age too well. This thing, I mean, most people that aren't like big car people, they'll come up and they'll ask, oh, is this thing new? No, this car is, what, 16 years old? And they're like, get out of here. Yeah, and you can fit the GTS is already 21 years old, the original GTS. And it looks pretty modern, even by today's standards, from what you see. But again, go out and rent a Viper. Even if you don't want to buy one, go out and rent this car and drive it. You will never forget it. You'll never regret it. But if you are in the market for one, or even have thought about purchasing one, definitely check this car out. Don't just dismiss this car. Unless you need something that has a little bit more practicality in it, or you want to drive it as more of a daily car, I would probably recommend maybe something else. But if you want performance, especially performance for the dollar, and something that's just really, really unique, you want something different from what almost everyone else has, get this. You won't regret it. You'll have a great time in it. You'll get a lot of smiles and a lot of waves. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.